We are in 1 Samuel chapter 26 today. Could I get somebody to kind of just catch us up to where we are in 1 Samuel so far? And really, I don't need you to cover the story about Samuel as much. And really, I don't need you to cover the story about Saul as much. Really, just recap the story of David so far in just maybe a few sentences. It doesn't need to be anything like chapter by chapter or anything like that. Could I get somebody to do that for us? Okay.
Shepherd boy to secret king to soldier, killed Goliath, and then served Saul. But Saul then got angry, so he ran away, and Saul's been chasing him.
That was actually very concise, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'll actually elaborate on that a bit.
Oh, Saul's son Jonathan and him are best friends, but they know that they can't be forever. They just have to stay.
They can't rule together.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
He had an opportunity to kill Saul, but he did not.
Yes. All right, so now we're really zooming in a little bit on the last few chapters, right? So, like you said, we had David, who was a shepherd boy. He was a musician, and he is anointed as the next king, and he's a man after God's own heart. And for a little bit, he is just this secret king, and we're wondering, how is this going to work out? Eventually, he is called to Saul's courts to play music for him. In another story, he ends up killing Goliath. And next thing you know, he is skyrocketing through fame. He becomes one of the most powerful and popular men in the kingdom. But Saul perceives this. Saul turns against him. And now David is on the run. And he's been on the run for a while. I think since, chapter 19? Maybe it is? And he's going to be on the run until 2 Samuel starts. And we're actually getting really close to the end of 1 Samuel, which is kind of exciting. We've almost made it all the way through this book. But yeah, so David has been on the run. And Saul has been chasing after him. And it's actually, I'm glad that Rocky mentioned this, because really the last 3 chapters go together really, really well. Chapters 24 and 26, as you're going to see, almost parallel each other exactly, and then chapter 5 is in the middle, and it's different, right? But really, all 3 scenarios are the same, and really it's like one big sandwich, where chapters 24 and 26 are the bread, and chapter 25 is the meat. So let's start real quick, just recapping it a little bit more. Chapter 24 was the part where David spared Saul for the first time. Can I get somebody to kind of just recap that a little bit more in depth? Yeah, go for it.
In chapter 25...
Or chapter 24. Yeah.
25. Similar to 24, but it wasn't Saul.
Okay.
It was another dude.
Yes.
And he had an opportunity to help out David, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of David forgiving him, he straight wants to kill him.
Yeah.
But the guy's wife tells him not to, gives him reasons, and stops him.
Yeah. So that's a really good story as well, right? So that's going to be the outlier here. But let's go back to chapter 24 real quick with the part where David spares Saul. Could I get somebody to just elaborate on that story a little bit more, just to recap what happened there?
I can.
Okay, go for it.
So basically, David and his men are in this cave hiding, and Saul's very close by, and they're in Engedi.
Yes.
And Saul goes to basically use the restroom in the front of the cave. He doesn't see the other men. David's men tell him this is his chance to kill Saul, but David tells him he will not touch God's anointed. Yeah. So he goes up to Saul and he cuts a part of his cloak off, and then confronts him after he's leaving and tells him, "Hey, I could have killed you." He's trying to tell him that he has nothing against Saul.
Yes.
Saul realizes this, and he has this kind of epiphany moment where he seems to be repenting and he feels bad. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and so really the interesting thing is that at the end of that chapter, Saul does repent, right? He says, "I have sinned," or he seems to repent, right?
You're a better man than I am.
Yes, he says, "You're a more righteous man than I am. I have repaid you evil for good, but you have repaid me good for evil." And it's really this amazing moment where it seems like everything is fixed. And then Saul says, "Hey, come back with me and let's just be buddies again." And he departs, but David goes somewhere else. And the chapter kind of ends on an ominous note where you're like, maybe things are not all good in the neighborhood, right? Then that moves on to chapter 25, where we get to the story that Rocky just recounted, right? Where this is David and him and his men, they're kind of acting like Robin Hood and the Merry Men. You know, they're going out and they're helping everybody. And they came across this one guy named Nabal, and he had shepherds who were in charge of his flocks. Nabal's a very rich guy. He's got shepherds with a lot of flocks, and just given the political climate at that time period, it was very dangerous to have these sheep and stuff because people might come in and try to steal them or harm them or do stuff like that. And so David's men, out of the kindness of their hearts, they appoint, David uses some of his men to protect these flocks. And whenever the time comes for, basically payday, David sends some men over there and says, hey, could you give us some money for this? And the guy says no. Even though David is asking for a basic common courtesy, the man says, I'm not helping you out.
Is it money or food?
Well, he's asking for... Back then, whenever I say money, I'm more just talking about payment in general, right? I'm not necessarily talking about cash. I'm just talking about some sort of payment. Yeah.
I think it's important to point out he was asking for stuff that they need. It's not like they had stuff and they just wanted more because they volunteered for something he didn't ask for.
Yes.
But
no.
They just wanted some food.
Yeah, David and them, they're not coming in there like gangsters being like, hey, pay up. No, it's like they actually need this stuff, to survive. Yeah, so absolutely. And so Nabal says, no, I am not going to do this. Who is David? And David is mad about this, and he comes storming in there, fully ready to kill these people. But then Nabal's wife hears about this. What is her name? Abigail, very good. Abigail hears about this, and what was the description that we get for Abigail?
She's a rock star.
She's a rock star.
Smart.
Paraphrase, yes.
Smart and beautiful.
Yeah, so she's beautiful and discerning, right? So she is a looker on the eyes, but she's also very wise. And she realizes that this is not good. She comes to David, she approaches him, and she brings more than David asked for, and gives it to him without asking her husband, and just appeases him and says, hey, whatever my husband did, put that guilt on me. I will gladly suffer for his sake. He is a fool. And his name literally means fool in Hebrew. And so she shows up and says, hey, I'm so sorry. I apologize. And she says some really amazing stuff, right? She says, don't harm Nabal and the men here, because if you do that, you're going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. It's going to afflict your conscience, and you're going to know that you acted harshly, and that is not who you are. You are a man after God's own heart. And not only will that afflict you because you did something sinful, but you're also going to have to live with the fact that in a way it looks like you put yourself on the throne because you are not okay with people questioning your authority. And David realizes, I have sinned. And David has to humble himself. And he apologizes. And he says, you know what? Let God take care of Nabal. And sure enough, God does. Right? So David backs off, and Nabal ends up dying because that night he was actually hosting a feast. He didn't even know what was going on. Nabal ends up having a stroke, it seems like, and he dies 10 days later. And then Abigail is now a widow, and David's like, well, I like Abigail. And so he ends up marrying Abigail. And then once again, the chapter ends on a little bit of an ominous note, because it turns out that, once again, everything is not good in the neighborhood because David is beginning to multiply wives, which, culturally speaking, was expected, right? A person in leadership like that, it was commonplace for them to have a bunch of wives. But, given the character of David and what we know about God's standards, it's still a little bit ominous. We're like, he is still a man, right? He's still not perfect. Now, real quick, before we go into chapter 26, somebody explain to me how chapters 24 and 25 relate to each other, specifically in the contrast. Because we spend a lot of time comparing those two, and if we understand those two comparisons, we'll kind of understand why 26 is important. I'm spending more time on this because it's actually crucial to us understanding 26.
To me, in one phrase, chapter 24 was David acting like a man after God's own heart, but 25 he acted in a way that showed that he was not a man after God's own heart. If that makes sense.
I would partially agree with that. I don't know if I would say that he did not act like a man after God's own heart, because to me, I would say that really the whole story of David is about a man after God's own heart. I would just say that maybe he didn't act perfect. Because the thing is, the moment David is rebuked for his sin and called out, he immediately repents and admits his guilt, and he's pretty torn up about it.
Yeah, his response.
And so his response does still show the characters of a man after God's own heart. I would maybe say that it does demonstrate to us that a man or woman after God's own heart is not always perfect. But I do think you're onto something 100%. Because we definitely see godly character traits showing up in chapter 24, and not very godly character traits showing up in 25. What is the key difference, though? Because there is a specific contrast going on there.
It's like his treatment of Saul versus Nabal. Like, both of them, you could say they repaid him evil for good.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of Saul, David still refused to hurt him because he was God's anointed.
Yeah.
Whereas with Nabal, he was just a guy.
Yeah.
And so he felt, indignant, and so he ended up trying to repay evil with evil.
Yeah, so it is very interesting when you contrast those because you have David in very similar situations, right? You have Saul, who's been pursuing him constantly, trying to kill him, and then you have Nabal, who just denied him some money. And so both of those are evil things, but whenever you're actually looking at which one is the more severe thing, what Saul has done is way worse than what Nabal did, right? Nabal was just not giving David the common courtesy that he deserved, whereas Saul literally had taken everything from David. Like, David is on the run, living in the wilderness. He would not be in this situation where he's asking something from Nabal if Saul had not turned against him, right? And so of the two evils, Saul has committed the greater one. Yet when it comes to how David treats Saul, he's a lot quicker to be gracious to him. And he feels guilty about even cutting off a piece of Saul's cloak. Whereas with Nabal, the moment Nabal insults him, he says, I'm going to go kill that guy. And not only Nabal, he's going to kill the entire family. It's like, wow. Like, you see this contrast, and you're like, David, what happened? Like, you were just so gracious to Saul, and now you're going to do this to Nabal. And now what we're going to see here, some people would look at chapters 24 and 26, and they'd say, this is weird, because the stories seem almost exactly alike. And they would say, what is the author doing here? Like, why is he just repeating the same story? But I think if you understand 24, 25, 26, you see that there is a pattern showing up here, where we're seeing the same story playing out in different scenarios, and we're having to see how David reacts to them. And we're tracking, basically we're learning what it means to be a man after God's own heart. Because sometimes you're going to be in the same scenario in just different places and different settings, and we have to learn how to consistently respond according to the grace of God and trusting in God's promises and stuff. And so whenever we see these repetitive stories, we might be tempted to be like, oh, it's just the same thing. But it's there for a reason. And so that's why I wanted to spend some time focusing on chapters 24 and 25, because you need to have those stories in your mind when you're going into chapter 26. Sound good? Mm-hmm. All right. So remember those stories, specifically chapter 24. That's the one where we're going to see a clear parallel for sure, but also 25 as well. Okay. I'm just going to do this one paragraph at a time. And it's also a relatively short chapter, so we should be good to go. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Is not David hiding himself on the hill of Hakilah, which is on the east of Jeshimon? So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of Hakilah, which is beside the road on the east of Jeshimon. But David remained in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed come. Then David rose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay with Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Saul was lying within the encampment while the army was encamped around him. All right, so let's break this down. What do we see happening here?
The Ziphites are going to Saul and revealing where David's at.
Yeah, so the Ziphites, all you need to know about Ziphites is that's a region, right? The land of Ziph. It's kind of in the same region that David's been in for the last little bit. He is in the southern region of Israel, so basically think of the Dead Sea area and just move a little bit over to the west. All of that area is where David's kind of traveling around. He's in the wilderness area. It's more desert-like region. Maybe just pockets of forest here and there, but primarily desert.
Right. Isn't that the people who came to Saul a few chapters ago?
Yes.
I believe it was. It was for the chapter I wasn't here for, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It was in chapter 23.
Yeah. It was the one where they're on
the mountain.
Yeah, the mountain.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the Ziphites, they're the ones who... this isn't their first rodeo, right? They have demonstrated that their allegiance is primarily to Saul. And this is the second occurrence of them going and reporting to him where David's at. What's interesting about this, though? Basically, last time we saw Saul, what was he saying?
He was repenting.
He was repenting.
Yeah.
And he said, David, I have sinned. I'm no longer going to pursue you anymore. And now what's happening?
He's pursuing him.
He's pursuing him again. And you've got to wonder what caused the change. Right? It could be as simple as this. It could be that the Ziphites came to him and they gave him a clear opportunity. Right? Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he kind of had moved on, but then the Ziphites say, hey, that guy who you've been trying to track, like, he's right there before you. And Saul's like, no, I put that behind me. But he's right there. Like, you could take him out. And maybe that's enough, right? It's just the temptation of it. Or it could be that Saul's repentance just wasn't even that genuine in the moment, right? In the moment, he was standing there, and David had his cloak in his hand, and he was ashamed, he was embarrassed, and he said, you know what? I'm sorry, I messed up. Because that's what you typically do whenever you're caught in the moment. But then as he thought about it more, he probably thought, who's David think he is, cutting at my cloak? Right? What else can he do but steal my kingdom? The last time somebody's cloak got torn, it was whenever I accidentally tore Samuel's, and that was about my kingdom being taken away. And so we don't know exactly what it was that caused Saul to once again turn against David, but one thing that we do know about Saul is that he is not right in the mind. Right? He is being tormented by evil spirits. God has sent these spirits upon him. Saul, I really do feel kind of bad for the guy. He is responsible for his actions. He is guilty, but at the same time, he is just a man. The difference between Saul and David is that David is super special and unique. He is a man after God's own heart, and so he is constantly doing things that surprise us. Saul is doing things that shouldn't surprise us at all. Because how many times in our own lives have we said, God, I'm never going to do this again? And then it's like 5 minutes later, we did it again. You know? That's just who we are as humans.
And he's a king like the nations.
Exactly. No, he is a king like the nations. He makes a promise. He doesn't keep it. He says, you know what, David, you are going to be the king. But then a few minutes later, he's like, but I still really like being king. And so he's going to turn against David again. And so here he is, same old song and dance. And if you see where this is heading, you might think, ooh, this is going to put David in an even trickier spot than he was at in the cave. Because he has been gracious to Saul. He has given Saul a chance to repent. Right? They have already gone, like basically the scenario is replaying itself out again, and now David has even more reason to kill Saul. Because Saul is going to be in a vulnerable position, and David has every reason to just step in and say, you know what? I tried doing this the easy way. You said you would back off, and you didn't. And so David can easily justify killing Saul. But even if you haven't read the chapter yet, you can probably already anticipate what David's going to do. Right? Because we've already seen this story play out twice. One time, David responded the right way. The second time, David responded the wrong way, but he was corrected. And so we know how he's going to respond this time too, even though the circumstances are even more extreme. So, the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah. What is Gibeah?
Saul's hometown.
It's his hometown, right? Yeah. What is the name of his capital?
Gibeah?
No, it is... It starts with G-I also. I'm just testing. What is that?
Galilee.
No.
Is it Gilgal?
Gilgal, yes. Gilgal is Saul's kind of capital, but lately we've seen him at Gibeah. And personally, I wonder what that states about the kingdom. Maybe he's just not spending a lot of time over there. Over in Gilgal, that's closer to the Jordan River. Maybe the kingdom is just falling apart to such a degree that he's not even at Gilgal anymore. I don't know. I really don't know what the circumstances are, but he's been spending a lot of time back home lately. And so he's at Gibeah, which, to be fair, it also is a little bit closer to David. Gibeah is nearer towards Jerusalem and stuff like that. So he's at Gibeah, and the Ziphites come to him and say, is not David hiding himself on the hill of Hakilah, which is on the east of Jeshimon? So here they are, tattletaling on him again. They're snitching. So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Notice how it doesn't even comment on the fact that Saul, like the author doesn't even mention, and Saul went against his promise and gathered the men. It just kind of says, like it's almost like the author expected this to happen, right? Which technically we were expecting it to happen if you were reading between the lines in chapter 24. Whenever Saul and David go different directions, that shows that David did not buy what Saul was saying. And so it was kind of expected, yeah, Saul's not going to be serious here. So Saul gets 3,000 men, they travel down, and Saul encamped on the hill of Hakilah, which is beside the road on the east of Jeshimon. Basically, they just go exactly where the Ziphites said, this is where David's at. But David remained in the wilderness. Okay, so what's interesting about that detail?
Instead of him like fleeing.
So yeah, he doesn't flee, but I guess this is kind of a hard thing to just kind of guess at what I'm going for here. If you're trying to ambush somebody, you're probably trying to do it by surprise, so you don't want them to know that you're there. But David seems to be aware of the fact that Saul's still coming after him, right? And so whenever it says David stayed in the wilderness, it seems like he knows that Saul's there and he's just not fleeing away. So it kind of just shows us where David's mindset's at. He's not really afraid right now. This is a really good moment for David. He is very confident. Whenever we get to chapter 27, we're going to see David have a little bit of a lapse of faith. And he is going to start kind of questioning things. But right now, David is not like that at all. This is another really good moment for David. He is trusting God. They're coming after him. He's not moving a muscle. He's like, no, I'm just going to stay here. And he seems to be aware of the fact that they're there. When he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul indeed had come. So he hears about this, and rather than fleeing like we saw the last time the Ziphites told Saul, this time he just kind of sticks his ground and he sends out people to go check. He says, hey, go figure out if Saul is indeed coming. And they're like, yeah, he is. Then David rose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. So rather than moving away from Saul, he actually walks right into it. He actually goes, and you can kind of imagine Saul and them camping out, and David and them just peering over a little crest of the hill, and he's actually spying this out himself. He rose and came to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul lay with Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Y'all remember the thing that I find so funny about Abner son of Ner? Yeah. What does Abner mean?
Son of my father.
Well, it means my father is Ner, right? Ab, like Abba, means father. So Abner is my father is Ner. So when you say Abner, son of Ner, it's my father is Ner, son of Ner. And so every time I see it, it cracks me up. It seems like that's just how you refer to people, but it seems like every single time he is mentioned in Samuel, they always call him Abner, son of Ner, which I'm just convinced that the author always just had a good chuckle whenever he said that. It's like my dad's name is David also, so I'm like David Davidson, technically. That's just really funny. But it's even more than that. It's like, my father is David Davidson. It's just so repetitive. To me, it almost seems like a silly way to refer to somebody. To where you're really not showing them a whole lot of respect, because I don't know if the author has a lot of respect for Abner. But that's me probably reading a little too much into it. I just personally laugh every time I read it. So David rose, he came to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul lay with Abner son of Ner, the commander of his army. Saul was lying within the encampment while the army was encamped around him. Okay, paint the picture for me. Imagine you're filming a movie. What does the scene look like?
Saul in the middle, the army around him.
Yeah, and why would he be in that position?
He's least vulnerable.
He'd be the least vulnerable, for sure. And why is that significant? Who is Saul?
He's the king.
He's the king, right? So it makes sense that if you're protecting the king, especially if there's this dangerous fugitive named David somewhere around you, you're going to want to protect the king from this guy who's trying to kill him, right? And so you can picture this. If I were filming the movie, I would probably, I would have David and some of his spies just peering over the crest of the hill as the camera pans up, and it just goes over their shoulder, and you just see it in the darkness, and you just see a camp down there with some tents all around, and then the men literally just laying down in circular patterns all around, and Saul is in the center, and Abner is right next to him, right? The commander of his army is right there, his chief bodyguard, they're laying there, they're asleep, and David and them are kind of looking back and forth, trying to decide what to do. Right? Very dramatic moment here, where once again they're vulnerable, right? In chapter, you have to see the comparisons. In chapter 24, what was Saul doing?
He's going to the bathroom.
He was going to the bathroom, right? He literally came to the place where David was at, was in the cave, and David was right there, and he was busy using the restroom. And David is watching them while he's vulnerable. Same thing here, right? Once again, he's literally come to the place where David's at. And David is watching him while he's vulnerable. So it's a clear parallel going on here. Same exact scenario. Both times, Saul is trying to one-up David, yet David is still the one in charge. And so even before anything else is happening, we see that God is protecting David here, right? Rather than Saul, like there's never a moment where Saul just surprises David, right? In all these moments, David is the one who's surprising Saul, right? Saul's never pulling a fast one on David. David always knows what's up because God is on his side. Moving on to the next paragraph. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Joab's brother Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night. And there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment, with his spear stuck in the ground at his head. And Abner and the army lay around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hands this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? And David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But take now the spear that is at his head and the jar of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jar of water from Saul's head, and they went away. No man saw it or knew it, nor did any wake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. You see the parallels happening here, right? It's literally, rewind and repeat, just in a different setting. It's almost like Groundhog Day or something, where it's like, I've been here before. Deja vu. Okay, what's happening? Once again, paint the picture for me.
He has a chance to kill him while he's just laying there in the campsite. His spear's right there. He could just pick it up and kill him.
Yes.
Abishai wants to be jail.
What's that?
Abishai.
Yes, Abishai is just wanting to be jail from the book of Judges, right? He's like, hey, I don't even need a tent peg. I got a spear right here. Yes. So Abishai is definitely wanting to do some fun stuff. But yeah, so here we have another opportunity for David to kill Saul, and another opportunity where David spares him. Kind of cool. Okay, let's walk through it. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Joab's brother Abishai the son of Zeruiah. Okay, we should probably start by talking about who these two guys are. Ahimelech the Hittite. Who is that? Yeah, we don't know much about him. As far as I know, this is the first time Ahimelech is mentioned, but the term Hittite might sound familiar to some of y'all. Do you know where?
Is that the people that Moses?
No, not quite. I don't remember. I have to look up where the Hittites are from. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it's safe to say they are not Israelites.
That's what Esau, I think, went to.
Is it?
I think Esau married Hittites.
Yeah.
I'll have to look it up. Well, I thought he married Ishmaelites, but let me see. You could be right. But specifically, there's one thing in my mind that I do have. There's one thing I do have in mind. So Hittites were I'm just going off Wikipedia, so Wikipedia could be wrong here. The Hittites were an Anatolian people, so that's up in Turkey, who played an important role in establishing first a kingdom in Kusara, and then Kanesh, or the Nesha kingdom. You don't need to know that stuff. Basically, they were in Levant, Upper Mesopotamia, and in Turkey. So that's kind of where they came from. But there's one particular Hittite that you're going to want to know about. What is his name? He's also going to be a significant friend of David until he's not. Uriah. Uriah the Hittite. What is his wife's name? Bathsheba. Right? So the main reason I say that is just to kind of foreshadow the fact that apparently there are also non-Israelites with David. And what we can probably presume from this is that these are really more assassins for hire that David probably hired to join him with them. Because they're not Israelites. And maybe they're just people who converted to the faith. We don't know a lot of why they ended up with David. But the Hittites were not Israelite people. But David does have a prominent Hittite right here. And later on, we're going to learn that Uriah is also a prominent Hittite that was amongst David's mighty men, which is going to be even sadder whenever we get to the story of Bathsheba. So that's one guy, right? We have Ahimelech the Hittite, who I think this is the first time he's been mentioned.
Wait, is he the same person who's the priest who gave the bread? Because his name was Ahimelech?
No.
Or that's a different
No, different Ahimelech.
Okay.
Yes. So that's a different Ahimelech, and that Ahimelech is dead.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes. He got killed.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
That's right.
His son Abiathar is still
I
alive
forgot
and traveling
about
with David.
that.
But yeah,
Yes.
that's the confusing part. Some of the names are similar. But this is a different Ahimelech. This dude is not an Israelite, but he is traveling around with David. And then the second person we have mentioned here is Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah. 3 names there, and we probably need to talk about each of them real quick. Who is Joab?
I don't know.
Isn't that David's armor bearer?
He's going to be the commander of David's army. So basically, Joab is to David what Abner is to Saul. But I don't think we've really heard a lot about Joab so far. I don't think he's even been mentioned so far. I could be wrong. Joab is going to be very prominent later on, especially in 2 Samuel. Joab is not a guy that you want to get on the bad side of. Like that, if you just want to know about Joab, just right off the bat, he's a cruel man. And a lot of us, like whenever David has Uriah killed, he sends the letter to Joab. Because he knows that Joab is going to read that letter and not going to have any qualms about having a guy killed. Joab is ruthless, but also interestingly, let's go over to this other thing. Skip Abishai real quick. Son of Zeruiah. Who is Zeruiah?
No clue.
I was scared that it was gonna burst.
Who is Zeruiah? I'll just tell you. Zeruiah is David's sister. Right? Yeah, so David had a bunch of brothers and a few sisters. Zeruiah was one of his sisters, presumably a lot older, because she had a son who was old enough to be traveling around with David and become his commander in the army. So we can imagine that Zeruiah is probably maybe 10, 15 years older than David, but she is his sister, which makes Joab David's nephew, and that also makes Abishai David's
Nephew.
nephew. Yeah, because Abishai is Joab's brother. And so we have Ahimelech the Hittite, who is just probably a mercenary for hire, who's traveling around with David. And then we have David's nephew. Joab is not with him right here, but Joab is the more prominent one. That's why it refers to him as Joab's brother Abishai. Because Abishai is important, Joab is more prominent. And so for the person who's writing this, they're like, you might not know who Abishai is, but you know who Joab is. This is Joab's brother, son of Zeruiah. Right, so Zeruiah is David. Like basically, I'm just trying to get these names in our heads because they're going to become prominent later. So we have a familial connection, and then we have a non-Israelite. David turns to both of them, and he says, "Who will go down with me into the camp of Saul?" What's David thinking here? Okay, how about let me rephrase the question. If you're one of these guys, what do you think David's thinking?
That he's going to go and kill him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he has the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, David spared Saul the first time. He gave Saul a chance to not come back. Saul's chasing after him again. We saw how mad David was last time with Nabal. Oh, well, now David's justified. I mean, God has delivered Saul into his hands for a second time. David would be a fool not to kill Saul this time. And Saul says, all right, guys, who's going to go down there with me?
You mean David?
David, yes, sorry. David says, all right, guys, who's going to go down there with me? And it's kind of a cool moment for David, right? David is not afraid at all. You know, this guy has been chasing after him day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And now here the guy is right before him, and David's like, hey, guys, I'm going to walk into the middle of an army. Who's going with me? Like, the question is, like, he's not saying, I'm only going if y'all go with. He's like, I'm going. Who wants to join? Like, there are 3,000 men camped around the king of Israel, and David has no qualms about, like, yeah, I'm just going to walk right in there. Because David's confident. He's got nothing to fear. He's like, yeah, God's with me. Who's going with? Like, y'all want to join me? And you're just, like, for them, they're like, man, I don't want to miss out on the party. Like, yeah, I mean, if David's going, sure, I'll go with. Right? I just love that little remark. Who's going with me? It's like, I'd be like, I don't really want to, but I feel like I have, like, a severe, like, fear of missing out if I didn't go. So I was like, sure, I guess I'll go. Abishai says, I'll go down with you. Right? So Ahimelech, he's like, I'm good here. But Abishai's like, Uncle David, I'll join you. And so he goes down, right? So David and Abishai went to the army by night. Right? So it's nighttime, and this is, the Mission Impossible theme starts playing in the background. They're creeping in there. They're hiding behind tents and stuff, and they're just creeping through. They went by night. And there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment, with his spear stuck in the ground at its head, and Abner and the army lay around him. You see how the scene is being painted for us? There is Saul. The spear is right next to his head. Abner is right there. If David wanted, all he'd have to do is pick up, it's almost too easy, right? The spear is right there. The answer to all of his problems. All he has to do is just done, right? And then he could kill Abner as well, and then he could be in charge, right? Everybody would bow to him. I mean, if the whole army wakes up and sees that David has snuck in their midst without them waking up and has killed their king, they're probably just gonna bend their knee to him, right? They're gonna be like, oh, we stand no chance against this David guy. He was able to slip through our ranks without us even noticing. He is the king, right? They would all bow down to him. This is a clear opportunity. David could easily just end all their sorrows. He would be able to stop living in the wilderness. He would be able to stop freaking out. He could easily fix it right now. And he could do it in the most beautiful way possible. He could use Saul's own spear. The same spear that had been chucked at David 3 times thus far, and which had been chucked at Jonathan once. Right? This spear had been used 4 times to attack either David or his best friend. And now, in the most beautiful sense of irony ever, he could just pick it up and just jab it into Saul's head or into his chest. And he could easily end the story.
Would, in that case, would he not have to kill Jonathan?
Technically he doesn't have to kill anybody. Most likely, in order for David to have a legitimate claim on the throne, Jonathan will have to die. I don't think David would ever kill Jonathan. I think that if Jonathan hadn't died, Jonathan's going to die in battle. But if they had been in that scenario, it would have been very awkward for them. And I'm not sure how it would have handled. I don't think David would have ever killed Jonathan. No. And so that's why God took care of that. Because nobody, if the king dies and his heir is alive, it doesn't matter how much people like David, Jonathan would have been king. And so that was kind of the sad reality there. But you can see the tension in this moment, right? Because, and even from David's perspective, you could see how it's I gave you a chance. You said you were sorry. You repented. And now you're right back here chasing after me again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Right? It's how far are we supposed to be gracious? Peter's words to Jesus ring in your ears, right? Master, how many times must I forgive a brother who sins against me? As many as 7 times? And Jesus is no, 70 times 7. Right? He's endless amounts. And David's here, and he's wrestling through that same thing. He's this guy's been chasing after me, and I gave him his chance. I was gracious. He should have repented. And you know what? Maybe it's time for him to meet the law. Maybe it's time for me to just finally do this. That would be the easy way out. But let's see what happens. Then Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with 1 stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. How does Abishai interpret this scenario?
This is your opportunity. Take it now.
Yeah. And I don't blame him for interpreting it this way. Right? From the other perspective, they're hey, we listened to you last time, but do you think it's a coincidence that you're in the same scenario again? David, it seems like God wants you to kill Saul. Just read the room, David. He gave you this opportunity when they were in the cave and you didn't take it. And then you told him to back off, and he said he'd back off. But then even when he turned against you again, God has once again allowed us to stand right here, and the spear is there. And think about what the spear represents. It's your scepter, right? This spear represents Saul's authority. The irony of picking up a spear that represents Saul's authority and killing Saul with that spear. That sends a message. You can understand where Abishai's coming from. He's Uncle David, man, I know that you didn't want to kill Saul the first time, but it sure seems like God is telling you to do this. This is definitely David being tested. Like, there's no way of going around it. Because it really does look like that. That is what it appears like. I mean, what are the odds that Saul's been chasing David all this time, and literally he had people rat David out and snitch on him, yet David is still the one who has the upper hand on Saul. It seems like God is giving David the chance to kill him. Abishai looks at it and he says, hey, maybe you don't even be the one. Like, maybe you don't want to kill him. I get it. Like, you have a thing against killing Saul. You don't want to touch the Lord's anointed. I get it. You care for Saul. You care for his daughter. You care for his son. I get that. You don't want to kill him. And so he says, please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. This is what Saul was talking about when he referenced the story of Jael from the book of Judges, because remember how it said that she pinned Sisera to the earth with the tent peg, right? Right through the temple. Well, Abishai is saying, let me do it. He says, I won't even have to stab him twice. Like, I'll get him on the first try. Let me grab that spear, let me drive it through him and make him stick to the earth. I won't have to go twice. It'll be a quick death. It won't be painful. Let me just get it done. All I'd have to do is grab the spear, and in one stroke, all our misery could be over. It sounds like a pretty good deal. Like, if I was David, and I'd gone through, like, I mean, this point, it's been it's probably been like a decade of being on the run. And you're looking, and you're like, this is the guy. I mean, think about how much bitterness we usually have against somebody who does something really small against us. Imagine there's somebody who had been causing you an endless torment for 10 years. And now he's right here defenseless. And you know that if the roles were reversed, he would slice off your head in a moment. You're looking at this guy. And now you even have your young nephew saying, hey, you know what? If you don't want to kill him, I'll do it. Wow, look at that. That's even a way for you to get out of being technically the guilty one. You can just say, oh, well, I didn't want to kill him. Abishai did it. Whoops. You have a clear out. It would be so easy to just say, do it. But look at David's response. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? Sound familiar? Sounds just like chapter 24. David has not changed. If anything, he's gotten better. Right? I mentioned that chapter 24 was David at his best. This is David at his bestest. It's his extra most bestest Little Caesar's pizza with the extra pepperoni. This is just David, a superstar. I would think, I'm going to be honest, every single person in this room, I would expect you to fail in this scenario. And I would expect myself to fail. And I think you would be justified in failing because this would be so easy. But David is built different. And he is an example for all of us. This guy has been nothing but cruel to him. And even when David gave him the opportunity to repent, he rejected it. Yet that didn't stop David from being gracious. And he says, And he says, Abishai, I can't even allow you to do that. It's not about just me doing it. It's about anybody doing it. Whoever touches the Lord's anointed, that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Why would you raise up your hand against the one that God has chosen? David is just a superstar.
And something I think is cool too is that Saul repented before and he made an oath with David in front of the Lord, and we know how important David thinks swearing something on God's name or making an oath between two people and God being in that, how important that is to him. And so he would have, I would think, even more of a reason to be mad at Saul right now.
Yep.
And then also having his nephew with him, it's not just on him, he's also setting an example for a younger person who's going to go back to these other people and say, hey, David didn't do it, but he allowed me to do it. And so that still is on David's name, even if he physically didn't do it. He's still setting an example, and that points back to God also.
Yeah.
So.
Do you see all the nuance? There's so much going on here. He's setting an example for Abishai, and no matter what he decides here, that message is getting back to not only his men, but to the rest of the nation. Because if he kills Saul, then they're going to say, David approved of this, or David did it. And he's also going to show, hey, this is how we're going to do things in my kingdom.
Yeah.
Right? Whenever I'm king, whatever it takes to get you out of a miserable spot, you can do it.
Yeah.
But David's saying it's not about that. It's about honoring God. And if I have to suffer under an unrighteous ruler in order to glorify God, I will do it. But I will not force myself on the throne. I will not do anything to violate God's anointed. This is regret. Even David's not king yet, but he is establishing what his kingdom will be like. It's kind of like when Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying, guys, you want to know what my kingdom's going to be like? Here it is. Well, David's establishing it here as well. If you want to be part of my kingdom, you need to realize there's one thing. You do not work against God. And even if you don't know exactly what God's doing, you play it safe. And you don't touch somebody that God has sealed. Right? You don't oppose him. And I think what you're saying also plays into what David's going to say, specifically in regards to the oath. So, he says, you can't remain guiltless. And David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he'll go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. So what does David say there?
I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, he says Saul's going to die because Saul made the oath, right? Saul said, I'm going to do this, and he lied. And so he knows, Saul's going to die, mainly because also he has the promise that he will be king.
Right.
And so he knows Saul's going to die some way. I don't know how he's going to die. It could be, what are the different things? As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him. It could be supernatural. Or his day will come to die. He could just die of old age. Or he'll go down to battle and perish. Or he'll die in battle. So we have a supernatural death, a death of old age, or just a natural death in battle. He says Saul's going to die in one of those three ways. I don't know which one. The only thing I know for certain is that he will not die by my hand or by my instruction. So he's like, I know that God will deliver me and God will eventually put me on the throne. And in order for that to happen, Saul will have to die. But I'm not going to be the one to do it. He's clearly stating, I'm not forcing God's hand. I'm not forcing my way into power. God's going to have to exalt me. I will not exalt myself. When it comes to application, it's rich. Right? Think about how many times we try to exalt ourselves. But David's like, Like, I'm not going to do anything to exalt myself. When God wants to exalt me, he'll do it. Until then, I'm just going to be faithful to him. Even if it means suffering. Oh, but I mean, David's talking about the kingship here. This applies to just like small, like whatever job we have, right? We're always seeking the next promotion. No, just be faithful. Don't play the whole political game. No, just be faithful. And in time, if God chooses to exalt you, so be it. If it means you're going to have to suffer for a bit, that's fine. It's not about having a comfortable, easy life. It's about being faithful to God. And David totally gets that. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed, but take now the spear that is at his head and the jar of water and let us go. So instead of cutting away at Saul's garment, he does something that is less offensive, but sends a greater message, right? So he's not actually cutting away at anything, but what do these things represent? Let's start with the spear. I already kind of addressed what that represents. What is it?
The scepter?
It's your scepter. Yeah, this is your source of, like, it is the, this is your power, right? He who holds the scepter is the one in charge. Well, now who has Saul's spear? David. So who is the one in charge? David. All right. Where are they at right now?
In the desert.
In the desert. What do you need to survive in the desert?
Water.
Right? It's your source of life. What does David take?
The water.
Water. And so now David holds Saul's authority and Saul's life in his hands. And he makes his exit. Right? And you gotta imagine, this probably wasn't a quiet thing. These people are all asleep, and David and them, they're literally having a conversation right now. And they're just sleeping. And so you're probably wondering, where does this come from? Well, it's going to explain it to us. So David took the spear and jar of water from Saul's head, and they went away. No man saw it or knew it, nor did any wake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. What does this bring to mind to you? A deep sleep from the Lord. There's a few places where we see this phrase crop up.
In Genesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
The stairway.
There's that, right? But even earlier in Genesis, we have Adam and Eve, right? God put a deep sleep upon Adam. And then he performed surgery on Adam to make Eve, right? Later on, we have Abraham falling into a deep sleep given by God whenever he has this vision about the covenant, right? So God, I think it's the same exact word in Hebrew, like the word for deep sleep there. So God supernaturally made these people in a very deep sleep. What that looked like, I don't know. I don't know if God said, oh, by the way, I put a deep sleep on them, or they just realized, okay, we were not totally quiet there. God definitely had to be helping us out. But in some form or fashion, nobody knew about it. And think about how weird that is. That's like, you go to bed with just like all your possessions, you have your wallet here, your keys here, you wake up, it's all gone. You're like, how? Like somebody literally came, think about how terrifying that is also. to know that you were asleep and somebody stole everything from you. It's kind of a terrifying thing to wake up to, right? And so there's the intrigue. We move on. Then David went to the other side and stood far off on the top of the hill with a great space between them. And David called to the army and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, "Will you not answer, Abner?" Then Abner answered, "Who are you who calls to the king?" And David said to Abner, "Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the jar of water that was at his head." Interesting who David calls out to this time, right? Who did he call out to in chapter 24? Saul. But who does he call out now? Abner. What point does he seem to be making?
It seems like he's almost more concerned about like the protection of Saul than he is like Saul himself.
Yeah.
He's like, your job is to protect him, and he's the anointed one, so you should be doing your job, and you're not.
Yeah. He's like, dude, do you take your job so lightly? You are the commander of the kingdom of God, and you have God's anointed king right there, and you were able to sleep through this? I could have killed him. How dare you? Shame on you. And it's like, it's kind of funny because Saul's been trying to kill David, yet David's over here just kind of making like a moral lesson for Abner, being like, dude, you should not have allowed this to happen. Shame on you. You should be a better guard. Like, I just snuck in there and I could have killed him. If I wanted to, he'd be dead right now. And that would be on you, because you're supposed to watch over this guy. And, man, he hates me, yet I care about his protection more than you do. Man, like, it's kind of a very funny scenario. And the way I picture this, because Abner can't tell who it is, right? Because he's standing at a distance. For some reason, this reminds me, whenever I read this story, it reminds me of that scene in the animated Peter Pan movie. Whenever Peter Pan's like, y'all seen that movie? Like the Disney one? Where he's like speaking into his hat, and he's like talking in Captain Hook's voice. He's like, "Oh, Shmee!" And, it's just like, nobody knows what's going on. For some reason, I picture that moment here. I just imagined it, like, David's standing up on a hill and stuff. For some reason, I picture him behind a cliff being like, "Abner, are you a man?" And Abner's like, "What's going on?" I know that that's not what's actually happening here, but for some reason, that scene comes to mind. Okay, so David went over to the other side and stood far off on the top of a hill with a great space between them. So it's still nighttime. He goes off far away, and he goes off far away, first off, so they can't see who it is at first. And secondly, because if you're really close and they see David's right there, they're probably going to try to kill him before he even has a chance to explain himself. Yeah. And so he's standing at a distance, and he calls out to the army and said to Abner, son of Ner, to "My father is Ner, son of Ner." He says, "Will you not answer, Abner?" It's like, imagine being woken up to that. It's like, explain yourself. Like, Abner's like waking up. He's like, "What? Like, who's calling for me? Like, what do you want? Will you not answer? What do I need to explain?" You should know what you need to explain, right? He's going to explain. He's like, you need to explain where the king's water went and where the king's spear went. Because apparently while you were sleeping on the job, somebody stole it. Answer me. It's really funny. This is literally like it's like the CEO of a company showing up and just like getting on to all the employees for slacking off.
Yeah.
But the irony is that David is a fugitive. Like, even whenever David is not the king of the people, he is still protecting the king better. It's very weird. Like, the whole thing that's going on here with David is just very interesting. He literally cares so much about the kingdom that even whenever the king is currently trying to kill him, he's still seeking better ways to protect the king. Crazy. "Will you not answer, Abner?" Then Abner answered, "Who are you who calls to the king?" Probably not the answer David was asking for. David was wanting an explanation for why he allowed this to happen. But he's just like, who are you who calls to the king? And David said to Abner, "Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel?" He's kind of mocking him. Yeah, he's like, "Dude, are you a wuss? Are you a wimp? Like, why are you standing up there at a distance? Why are you afraid? You freaking out? Like, you think I got..." Like, he's just really kind of mocking him. I think it's funny, personally. "Why then have you not kept watch over the Lord your king? Like, are you not man enough for the job? Can you not do it? Like, Does the king need to find somebody better than you? Because I'm a fugitive who I've got really nothing to my name. I was able to steal this stuff. And once again, they still don't know it's David. But he's just mocking him outright. He's like, dude, like, come on. And you know for Abner, this is embarrassing. Like, this really is bad. Because now all the other people are waking up too. They're wiping their eyes. And they just hear the commander being outright rebuked by some guy standing in the distance. They don't know who this is. And he's just being like, dude, you suck at your job. And there's like, we weren't going to say it. You know, it's just a really funny scene. For one of the people came in to destroy the king your lord. The irony is he's talking about himself. Well, really, he's talking about Abishai, kind of. If it weren't, like, isn't that ironic? Technically, Abishai did go in there to destroy the Lord. To destroy the king, right, Saul. And Abner would have let it happen. The person who stopped Abishai from destroying the king is David. Right? So David is actually being a better commander of King Saul's army than Abner was. Like, that's really the irony here. David is doing a better job at serving Saul than Abner, yet Saul loves Abner and he hates David. This is the irony of this whole thing. David's making the same point. I don't have anything against Saul. I'm doing your job better than you are. And you think that I want to kill him? Seems like you're the one who wants to kill him. You're the one sleeping on the job and letting anybody do whatever they want. And the army's not doing any better. This thing that you have done is not good. Shame on you. You get 5 conduct marks and a straight detention. It's terrible. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die. And I don't think David's being sarcastic here. I think he means it. I don't think that he's just proving a point. I think he genuinely does care about Saul's well-being and says, dude, step your game up. We should not be able to walk in here and do this. Which is just, once again, just weird. Like, it's weird that David would care about this. But he says, no. David's not going to take God's name in vain here. He's not just going to bring up the name of God unless he actually means it. As Yahweh lives, which Yahweh eternally lives, right? He is the self-existent one, right? So, you deserve to die. Because you are not taking your job seriously enough. There should never be an opportunity where somebody could sneak in there and slay the Lord's anointed on your watch. Right? It is your obligation as one of God's people to protect him above all else. We're kind of seeing David's theology. Right? You're seeing why David is so confident in God's protection. Because he believes that God will protect him even using the people that he's provided. And he's saying, Abner, you are failing. Right? The king of God's people could have been killed under your watch because you are not doing your job. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you have not kept watch over your Lord, the Lord's anointed. Once again, you see the phrase anointed showing up again and again and again? This is always Mashiach, 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 Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. David is saying the Messiah is important. You should not allow any harm to face the Messiah. Ironically, there's going to be a lot of Abners at the time of Jesus, right, who are going to not do their job, and they're going to allow the Lord's anointed to be slain. And now see where the king's spear is in the jar of water that was at his head. Look around, Abner. Where is the king's authority? Where is the king's life? Oh, that's right. You allowed it to slip through your fingers while you were dozing off. I imagine Abner's going to get rough talking to after this. And Saul's like, yeah. Yeah, what's up with that, Abner? Why are you sleeping? But notice how Saul responds. Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." And he said, "Why does my lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is on my hands? Now therefore let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is men, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day, that I should have no share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth, away from the presence of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains." David's like, dude, stop chasing me. Like, I gave you a chance, I'm giving you another one. Stop, please. I'm tired of it.
He's like, I'm not important.
I'm not important. I'm a flea, right? In a place, you could be chasing partridges. You could be chasing after birds. But you're chasing after a tiny little fly. Why? Like, there's so many more important things you could be doing. You're the king of God's people. You should be chasing after the Philistines, the Canaanites, all these other people who are attacking your land. But instead, you're focusing on a person he's just a servant of you. He's done nothing but support you. I am literally being a better protector and bodyguard of you than your own bodyguard's doing, yet you're chasing after me rather than actually doing what God appointed you to do. Like, literally, David is just showing up here to tell people to do their jobs better. He's like, Abner, do your job better. Saul, do your job better. All right, I've shed my spiel. I'm getting out of here. Like, he's literally just showing up, and he's observing them, he's critiquing them, and he's like getting out. It's a really funny scene. The last time he was really trying to prove a point. Here, he's just kind of, you see his frustration. He's like, guys, the kingdom is falling apart under y'all's watch. The commander isn't commanding. The bodyguard isn't bodyguarding. The king isn't kinging. Are y'all doing anything right? You're chasing after a flea when you can be chasing after birds. Good job, guys. So we have this scene. Abner and David are talking back and forth. Saul is also waking up. He's wiping his eyes. He's standing up. And I don't know, maybe it's because he's a head taller than everybody else. He can actually see David a little bit better. But more importantly, he hears David. And Abner isn't familiar enough with David to know his voice. But Saul spent so much time listening to David sing to him. And they probably had conversations. And David was his armor bearer. He knows David's voice. And even though it's probably been years since they've talked closely, he recognizes the cadence of the voice. And he recognizes the anger about the whole touching the Lord's anointed, because David used to kind of be that for him. And he says, is that your voice, David? My son? And immediately you can already just pick up on the guilt in Saul's voice again. He realizes, crud. This again? Man, why can't I just kill this guy? It's like, man, he did the right thing again. I should be dead. And instead, he's just showing up and telling my bodyguard how to protect me better. He should have killed me. But instead, he's just still trying to protect me. My son, David, is that you? I've missed you so much. And David said, it is my voice, my lord, O king. He doesn't hide it. He's like, yeah, it's me. I'm here. I'm always watching. I'm always here for you, man. But you're attacking me for no reason. Right? But I've never lost sight of you. Even when you're attacking me, I still got your back. I'll still give your bodyguard some tips. I'll still give you some tips too, so listen up. And he said, why does my Lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is on my hands? He says, once again, I've spared you once, and I demonstrated to you that I don't want to kill you. I haven't done anything else against you. He almost did one thing, right? He almost killed a fellow Israelite. And that would have maybe been good reason to, if David goes through and kills Nabal and all those people, that would have looked more like a terrorist move. And then Saul could justify going back at him. But Abigail prevented him from doing that, right? So he hasn't done anything. He's like, no evil's on my hands. He says, I am clean. Why are you attacking me? Now therefore, let the Lord King hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. What's he saying there?
Was David still talking?
Yes. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering.
Is he saying that if it's God who's motivated you to be here right now, then it's justified, but if it's men that are telling you, then you should know better?
Yes. No, that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying, hey, if I sinned and God is the one who rose you up to attack me, I pray that God will accept my offering of forgiveness, because that's on me, and I apologize. Mm-hmm. But he's already clarified that that's not the case. He says there's no evil on my hands. Mm-hmm. But he's willing to be corrected. Right? And David is like this. Like, there's another place in 2 Samuel where David's going to be fleeing, and some people are going to mock him. And I think it's Abishai, again, who says, we should kill that person. And David says, no. He might be right. I might be being punished for my sin. Only God will tell. Right? And so David's pretty humble there. He says, hey, if I've sinned, I hope God will accept my offering. But don't kill me. I haven't done anything against you. Don't you turn against me. Because I haven't turned against you. But if it's men who have spurned you on, aka the Ziphites, those traitors, if it is men, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day, that I should have no share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. He says, if it's God who sent you here, then I've learned my lesson, and I'll give an offering, and I pray he'll forgive me. But if men are the ones who are telling you to come after me, I hope they're cursed before God. Why? Because y'all are running me out of the land that God promised to his people. They're running me out of Israel. This is the land God promised. They're making me leave the land, and they're telling me to go serve other gods. This is one thing that, if you ever heard of a guy named Michael Heiser, I've sent some of his videos in the group me. Fascinating guy. But one thing that he highlights in a lot of his books is the idea that there seem to be, he talks a lot about like the supernatural realm and stuff like that. And he talks about how there does seem to be a geographical association with different gods, right? So God, like Yahweh, is the one true God over all things, but he has specifically chosen the land of Israel as his headquarters, right? And it seems like other gods have been given different allotments of land, right? Some people are here, like, because we realize, like, some gods are just made up, but there are genuinely other Elohim, right? Other gods that are just, they're not the one true God who created all things. But there are other supernatural forces. The Bible talks about that. And so, Baal, Dagon, some of them, Zeus, I don't know. Some of them might be real figures that people worship. We don't know. We just know they're not the one true God. And it seems like God did apportion them different places where that is their location. And David's saying, people are telling me to leave the land of Israel, which is basically them telling me to go serve another God. But no, I want to stay in this land because the God of Israel is my God. So I'm not going to serve another God. And so whoever's telling you to chase after me, they're the ones who are causing me to be run out of this land, and I don't want to serve another God. And he wouldn't serve another God, but it's the association of that land with the God of Israel that he's hinting at here. Whenever you get to the book of 2 Kings, there's going to be this guy named Naaman, who comes from, I believe, Mesopotamia or something. And he's going to come down, and he is going, before he leaves, he's going to kind of be like, oh wow, the God of Israel is the one true God. And before he leaves, he says, allow me to take some dirt from this land, to take it back whenever I go back home. Why? Well, because he wants to worship the God of Israel. And he wants to take some of the land of the God of Israel with him. Because that land is, it's Yahweh's land. And so he wants to worship Yahweh on his home turf. So he takes dirt with him. So I think that's what David's getting at here. He says, hey, I hope those people are cursed because they are trying to run me out of Yahweh's territory. And that is unacceptable to me because I don't want to be associated with anything other than Yahweh. And so if God is the one sending you to chase after me, I'll give an offering. I hope he forgives me. But if it's men, I hope that God comes after them because I am tired of running. And I'm tired of being chased out of the land that God promised to our ancestors. Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth away from the presence of the Lord, right? Away from the presence of the Lord. Let not my blood fall to the earth. Let me not die in a land that is not God's. Technically, the whole earth is God's, but he's talking about that geographical location, right? Let my blood not fall in a land that is not on the earth away from the presence of the Lord. The presence of the Lord is in Israel. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains. You are making mountains out of molehills, man. You are chasing a flea when you could be chasing things way more important than me. As the king of Israel, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not opposed to your kingdom. I'm not going to, there's literally no point. What am I going to do to hinder your kingdom? I'm a flea. I don't want to destroy your kingdom. I want to protect you. That's why I'm critiquing you. That's why I'm critiquing Abner. Yeah. He says, I'm critiquing them because I care about your kingdom. I want it to be successful. I want it to do good. So stop chasing after me and stop running me out. Because I don't want to die on foreign soil. When I die, I want to go down in the land of Israel because that is where my God dwells. So stop running me out. I am tired of it. Chill out, man. David, you can see his frustration here. But he's making a really good point. And it's really, this is once again David just at his best. He's mad, but he is not allowing his anger to cause him to sin. He's using his anger to channel, righteous conviction, and he's rightfully rebuking somebody, and he's saying, hey, get serious about God and start focusing on the kingdom God gave to you rather than chasing after a person who wants nothing more than for your kingdom to succeed. Like, stop. It doesn't make any sense. You're trying to kill me when all I want to do is give you the thing that you want. You want power? I'm trying to give you that power. You're losing it by chasing after me. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly, and have made a great mistake. And David answered and said, Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and take it. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things, and will succeed in them. So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. Those are the last words that David and Saul are ever going to share with one another. It's not the last time that David's going to be concerned about Saul. It's not the last time Saul's going to be concerned about David. But as far as the Bible tells us, there might have been other interactions, but none significant enough to mention. This is the last time that David and Saul are going to interact. Because in a few chapters, what David in many ways kind of prophesied is going to come true. Saul will die in battle. And he's going to die by his own hand. So that's kind of sad. But that's going to come later on in these final chapters, because they're going to kind of go separate ways. They're going to have different stories going on here. The next chapter is actually a really short chapter, so we might be able to do some different stuff for Bible study next week. But let's talk about these final few verses. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. How does he respond? Does it sound familiar?
Yep.
He does.
Yeah.
Sort of repents again, but I think this may be more genuine than the last time.
This is actually a cycle stop this time. Last time he just said that he realizes that David's prophesied to be king.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say if it's more genuine. We don't really know. Like, I think that's one of the beautiful things about Samuel, is that you really never know. There's a lot of nuance, and you kind of have to just wait it out and see the fruits of a person's actions, right? I think Samuel is not trying to give us black and white answers, ever. Because the whole point of Samuel is it's about the heart, right? Like, that is the emphasis of Samuel, so we shouldn't expect it to be black and white. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of things that look good but are bad. There's a lot of things that are bad that look good, right? There are places where David is in a situation and he does something that looks evil, but it's actually good. And then there's places where Saul is right in front of him, and it seems like the good thing to do would be to kill Saul. You would be getting rid of a tyrant. You would be delivering all of your faithful followers from being oppressed and suffering. And it looks like the good thing to do would be to kill Saul, but instead he spares him. So the book of Samuel is all about nuance. And a lot of it is saying, before you are quick to judge, wait it out and see what comes from it. And so I don't know if Saul's repentance is totally genuine here. But once again, we have to realize Saul's just not of right mind. He is kind of handed over to evil at this point. And so, really, it's especially hard to say just because we don't have another interaction between the two of them. We would really have to see another interaction to see if it was genuine. Because really, a lot of what he's saying is just the same stuff. He says, I have sinned. Well, yeah. A lot of people recognize they've sinned. That doesn't count as repentance, right? All because you're remorseful, that's not the same as repentance. You don't have to be a Christian to feel remorse over evil that you've done. Anybody feels that. Repentance is about changing your actions and actually having a heart change. Saul he admits that he sins all the time. It's about, are you going to change what you're doing? And we just don't really know.
And I will say, if we're looking at Saul's character, just to give him a little bit of credit in the situation, we don't know his heart, but before we see that whenever Saul's confronted, he usually tries to backtrack. Whenever Samuel was coming up and he was giving the sacrifice,
yeah.
He was like, "Oh well, we thought you weren't coming." Here we don't see him backtracking. He at least admits to it. If we're just looking at it face value, we don't know what his heart is. But for him to own up with it with his own words, whenever we know how prideful Saul is, I think that says a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Because he's at least it at least utters from his mouth.
Yeah.
So.
But even the sad irony of that is that, in a way, it's a very sad picture of Saul, because we've seen Saul mess up multiple times, and really this tells us something about a man after God's own heart, right? Because we've seen Saul mess up multiple times, and every time that he was called out on his sin, he had less ways of getting out of it. Right? The first time, he was like, oh, well, Samuel, you showed up you showed up late. And so he was able to kind of divert the sin away from him. And then, the second time, whenever they didn't kill everything, he's like, oh, well, the people wanted to say the sacrifice. So he couldn't blame the prophet, but he could blame the people. And then now, we had David showing up the last time, and David's got the cloak, and Saul's like, okay, I really don't have an excuse now. But now, finally, at this one, he has even less excuse. Because David has been gracious to him twice, and this one's even more severe. So Saul is finally admitting to it, and he's not making any excuses. But if we've learned anything about his character, it's just because he doesn't have any excuses he can make. Right? That's really the sad reality of Saul, is that if there was an excuse he could make, he would probably make it. But God has ridded him of excuses. Every time he's been called out, he's been given less and less opportunities, so that God has really almost... If this is genuine repentance, God is forcing him to repent. Right? He is forcing him to realize, you are the problem. Whereas David, whenever he's called out, he never makes an excuse. Right? Whenever Abigail calls him out, this random woman, this is the first time he's met her. She's on the knees before him. He is fuming mad. She calls him out. He immediately repents. He says, that's me. That's my bad. In the moment whenever Abiathar, remember the son of the high priest, comes to him. And we really don't even know if David was fully guilty there, right? What was the issue? Like, David was responsible for the guy's death, but did David intentionally do anything wrong? I don't know. But David immediately says, this is my fault. So even whenever it's not his fault, David takes responsibility. Saul, he has to be forced into taking responsibility. So when it comes to figuring out what a man after God's own heart does, he's willing to take responsibility for stuff even when it's not his fault. That's what Jesus did, right? Jesus takes upon our sins even though it's not his sin, you know? So we're learning different qualities of what God values. And apparently taking responsibility for sin is actually an important trait. Whereas nowadays, we get into the legalistic mindset of just trying to be like, oh no, I'm very righteous. Well, no, it's actually important to admit your sins. If you're not willing to admit them, that might not be a good sign for you. Rather than going around parading our righteousness, maybe we need to admit our sinfulness, and that's the first step to actually being righteous. If you're acting like you don't have sin in your life, you haven't even begun the Christian journey, right? Because that's where it starts. So he says, my life was precious in your eyes this day, which is true, right? That's not just poetic speaking. His life, like David did view Saul's life as precious. He told Abishai not to kill him when Abishai easily could have. And Abishai respected his command. You know, if I were Abishai, I probably would have just still killed him. But Saul says, you spared me. My life was so precious to you that you even stuck around to give my commander further tips so that he didn't let this happen in the future. Thank you. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have made a great mistake. I've heard many commentators say that this is the shortest biography in the history of the world. Right here, Saul summarizes his entire life. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have made a great mistake. And unfortunately, that's the biography for not only Saul, but for many people in life. They get to the end of it, and they are just a few months away from death, and they realize, because at this point, Saul's just a few months away from death. He's going to be killed in battle. And finally, at long last, they look at their whole life, and they're like, man, I've acted foolishly and made a great mistake. I hope that none of us in this room will be like Saul. I hope that we will learn to live wisely and not make great mistakes. And so I hope we'll model ourselves more after David and not as much after Saul. And David answered and said, here's the spear, O king. He gives it back to him. Right? He says, hey, I've got the spear in my hand.
One of the young men come over, take it.
Yeah, come take it back. See, this is the symbol of your authority. I have it in my hand. I'm giving it back to you. I trust you. well, I don't know if he trusts it, but he's saying, you're the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to try to take that away from you. At the same time, we remember what he said last time. He said, hey, the Lord's going to bring vengeance. If the Lord wants you dead, he'll kill you. But I'm not going to do it. And so, here, take your spear. This is between you and God. It's not between me and you. Right? God will judge between the two of us. Here's your spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and take it. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and faithfulness. He's like, I'm going to keep the water, though, just FYI, because I'm thirsty. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. So he says, hey, I'm not being totally selfless here. By me sparing you, I trust that God will protect me in the future. Because God rewards people for their righteousness. And because I was willing to show hesed to you today, I trust that God will show hesed to me going forward. He doesn't use the word hesed, but this is what he's trusting in. Behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he deliver me out of all tribulation. Do you see what David did there? Whose sight was Saul's life precious in? David's. Whose sight does David want his life to be precious in? God's.
Not Saul's.
Not Saul's, right? You would expect it to be that, right? You would expect him to say, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in your sight. But the point is, David's saying, I'm not trusting in you, right? I'm trusting in God. I don't care. Like he's saying, Saul, I don't care whether or not my life's precious in your sight. It really doesn't matter to me. I wish it was, because we used to be friends. But it doesn't matter to me. Because whether or not my life's precious in your sight really doesn't make a difference unless it's precious in God's sight. Because if my life is precious in God's sight, then he'll protect me. No matter what you do. Whether you hate me or not, God's going to protect me. So when it comes to the two, I'm going to be on God's side, not yours. So he's still making his allegiance perfectly clear. He says, you're God's anointed, but God is my king. Right? Sure, you are his king right now, but he is my king of kings. So no matter what you do, I'm going to keep serving God. And I hope that he's watching out for me, and you can do whatever you want. I've given you another chance. This is your 75th chance, dude. Make the right decision. And may he deliver me out of all tribulation. Including the one that you're currently bringing about me right now. So that kind of... I don't think this is how David intends it. I think David's just talking about, in general, may God protect him throughout life. But implicit into him saying this is that Saul's going to have to be destroyed. But I don't think that's really what he's focusing on. I don't even think he's thinking about that as he's saying it. But that's just kind of what's going to have to happen in order for this tribulation to end. Then Saul said to David, Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them. It's kind of a good way for them to part. You know, it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's kind of just a nice closure to it. Whenever we get to chapter 27, David's going to be afraid of Saul again. And that's where I was saying we're going to see a little lapse of faith. Because David's actually freaking out. And he's not going to be nearly as confident as he is right here. And you're wondering, what happened? To me, it must suggest that Saul does recant and start chasing him again. We don't know. But right here, they kind of part on good terms. He doesn't restate the king thing that he said in chapter 24, but he still says some really good stuff. Right? You will do many things and will succeed in them. Saul's kind of coming to the same conclusion that everybody else has come to about David. God's on his side. God is going to bless you, and you're going to do a lot of stuff, and you're successful. Because that's just kind of who David is. Whatever David sets his mind to, he's good at it. Right? If he wants to be a shepherd, he's going to be the best shepherd. If he's going to be a musician, he's going to make the whole world sing, and everybody's going to sing his songs because they're going to be the biggest songbook in the world, right? The most amazing thing. If he's going to be a king, he's going to be the best king. If he's going to be a warrior, he's going to be the best warrior. If he's going to be a fugitive, he's going to be the best fugitive. If he's going to be a sinner, he's going to be the best sinner, and he's going to just go all out. He's going to just do the worst possible things. But if he's going to repent, he's going to be the best repenter. So Saul looks at him and he says, you know, David, you have unmatched potential. You are going to go out and do some amazing stuff. And he doesn't say anything about himself. You know, he actually just compliments David. And then it says, so David went his way and Saul returned to his place. It ends in the same ominous way. right? They don't tug it out. They don't shake hands. There is never a moment where David steps closer to Saul. Instead, he says, you can have the spear back, but you're going to have to send one of your men to come get it. Right? So their relationship isn't mended. It's not like everything's all good now. But they've at least interacted again. And David has made it clear, I'm not trying to kill you. Then, instead of going together back to Gilgal or to Gibeah or anything, really, part of you just wants them to partner up and just go and fix everything. That's not what happens. They go separate ways, and as far as we know, they never see each other again. And I'm pretty confident when I say that. Most likely, it's going to be like 2 chapters from now, and then David and Saul saw each other again. I don't believe so. I did reread all this stuff recently, but I'm pretty sure this is the last interaction between them. And so they go their separate ways. David goes back into hiding, and we're going to see where David goes, actually. He's going to go back to Philistine territory again, because that worked so well for him last time. That was sarcasm. And then Saul's going to go off, and he's eventually going to go into battle against the Philistines, and he's eventually going to fall in battle alongside all of his sons. And that's going to be what we're going to cover in the last few chapters of Samuel. And I know I kind of spoiled it, but guess what? It's been out for thousands of years. You'll be fine. Do y'all have any... we actually talked about a lot of application throughout this, and so I think we're probably good there. Do y'all have any last comments y'all want to make before we wrap it up?
For like a possible application,
Okay.
We see that like David is always focused more on like God's promises and what the future brings versus like what Saul's trying to do in the moment, or really just like the situations that surround him at the moment. Could that be something that we say like our mindset should be more eternal than it should be like with our feet planted 2 feet on the earth at the moment? We're thinking more about like the future and God's promises for us.
I think that's a very great application for it. Because I think that, mainly because I say that because that's exactly what Jesus tells us to do. Right? So I think that if you see David doing it, and later on Jesus is going to be like, yeah, do that, probably good application. David is not focused primarily on his circumstances. He's focused on God's promises, and David is at his best when he's focused on them. In the next chapter, he's not going to be focused on them very much. I believe in the entire chapter, God's not even mentioned. I don't think. David is literally just... What's that?
For him to look at it would be much better for him than something more grounded.
Yeah, because whenever David is realizing God's going to make me king, he doesn't have to fight for anything. Right? All he has to do is learn, okay, I got to be faithful to God right here, right now. Right? Whenever we are striving and trying to forge our own destinies, we have a lot more to be anxious about, a lot more to worry about, because we think we're in charge of things and we're trying to figure out stuff for ourselves. But if we think about the fact that there's this future promise where one day we will dwell with God for eternity in a world free of all the sinful brokenness that we have nowadays, that frees us up a whole lot. Because now, you know what? What happens a week from now? It really isn't that significant in the grand scheme of things, as long as I'm being faithful to God today. You know? If you're not being faithful to God, then yeah, you probably should worry about what comes from a week from now. But, you know, whether a week from now is your best day or your worst day, whether it's the greatest triumph or the greatest tragedy in your life, it doesn't really matter that much as long as you're being faithful to God day by day. Right? And that's what David recognized. He's like, you know what? Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up in a palace, maybe I'll still be in a cave. It doesn't matter, because eventually I'm going to end up on the throne, because God promised me that. And so he's not having to strive to try to make his life better or stuff like that. His primary focus is, how do I be faithful to God today? And then letting God take care of the rest. It really frees you up a whole lot, and that's really what we should be able to do. Because nowadays we're all about, where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. Let God take care of that. I'm going to ask you, what are you doing today to be faithful to God? And how are you being faithful to God in the current place where you're at right now? Because if you're so focused on getting somewhere in 5 years, well, you might set aside your godly principles in order to get there. I don't know. Maybe let God decide where you are 5 years from now, and he'll get you there. You know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like trying to, like having a dream where you want to do something, but it all needs to be submitted to God first. And I think that's a very good principle, right? So whenever we're talking about living with an eternal mindset, it's different than always worrying about what's 10 or 20 years now. No, it's like thinking about the promises that God has and how that affects you living in the present. right? And so yeah, I think that's a very good application point. And David is at his best whenever he is focused that way, and he's at his worst whenever he's not. And so if we're talking about what it means to be a man or woman after God's own heart, yeah, probably have that mindset. Anything else? Nada?
I was thinking about that today because like the job I'm at,
Yeah.
it looks very promising.
Oh, nice.
And I'm really excited.
That's cool.
Like people are, you're helping. I'm going to be helping a lot of people,
Uh-huh.
and I myself, it looks like I will be making a lot of money.
Oh.
And so I'm very excited to help my brothers and sisters. Like
Yeah.
Like first get Lily and I a house, but then like help everybody around us.
Dude,
It's
that's
really
really cool.
awesome. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Sweet.
As long as I put in the work, basically.
Yeah.
Like God's giving me the job, and He will give me the strength to do it, and I just got to do the work.
Absolutely.
What's your like title or company? Or
It's U.S. Health Advisors.
Nice.
Selling health insurance. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that's awesome, and we'll make sure to pray for that.
Yes, that's what I was gonna. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Oh yeah, because we're gonna pray now again, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Just to pray for Lily and I as we start our new jobs.
Yeah.
Because we started on Monday.
Well, how about this? Do you want to lead us in prayer? Real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Any other requests?
For my sermon thing tomorrow, if you could pray for that, just because, yes.
And actually, yes, for healthcare, for people trying to, get people the care they need and their services, whatever that is, whatever it costs.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Anybody else?
Safe travels.
Where are you going?
Going to Viva Las Vegas.
Oh, goodness.
2 days.
Oh, watch out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. That'll be cool.
What's the occasion?
What's the occasion?
Oh, 21st birthday.
Oh, wow.
Ooh,
Okay.
nice. All right. Make smart choices. All right. Pray for us. Let's
Okay.
go.
Lord, we thank you for this night, and that we get to study your word and learn from it. We pray that we remember it and apply what is applicable to our lives, and just learn from what you've done in history, and using a man after your heart. And Lord, I pray for Lily and I as we start our new jobs, that we serve you in everything and glorify you in everything we do, and shine your light to everyone around us, and use the money that we earn wisely. And Lord, I pray for David as he has his sermon he's giving tomorrow. Pray that it touches the hearts of all who hear it, and that if they need change in their lives, that they see it, and that David gets a good grade, does well in his course. And I pray for all those who need health care, that they're getting what they need at a good price, and they know that it all comes from you. I pray for Maverick as he goes to Vegas, that he stays safe, and we thank you that he's been on this earth for 21 years, and pray that he makes good decisions over there in Vegas, because it's a very dangerous place. Pray that he glorifies you as he's over there. We thank you for all that you give us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Cool. All right, before I wrap up this video real quick, I'm going to include this. Everybody with the Hesed shirt, get over here. We're going to stand here and just show everybody in the video. Come on, get up here. Get up here. All right. Yeah, I've got to show everybody this.
This was not planned.
Most everybody
Not
in here,
planned.
I went through this on once y'all had it on. But, so, we've got our Hesed shirt here. It says, Ki Le'olam Chasdo, which means, for his Hesed endures forever. It's our shirts for the well. That's the group this is. So it's there, and then on the back, it's got the well logo. And so I just figured we'd show that to y'all, just because we're all wearing it. You're going to see us wearing it. These other people have it on as well. I mean, they have the shirt. They just didn't wear it. And so y'all have a great day. Keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. And we will see y'all next week. All right.
Mine is strawberries.
There you go. Right. We all have our phrases.